I just want to say before I get started that my sister and I have seen, met, and encountered some pretty creepy people before. We watch each other's backs and both of us can pick up on and spot the behaviors of someone with bad intentions pretty quickly. Whether that's an odd conversation or just passing glances from someone, we can tell pretty quickly for the most part. We've definitely had our fair share of scary people encounters, but this was different. I fully believe that it wasn't human, and when I say that whatever it was scared me more than any other thing that I've encountered, I genuinely mean it. So, my sister and I both live in central West Michigan, in the Lower Peninsula, and 2 weeks ago, we wanted to get out for the day, and to get where we wanted to go was a fairly long drive. So we started out at dawn just as the sun was starting to rise. We agreed to stop at the gas station in town to get something to eat and drink. We also needed a new car charging port because the one that we had gone out. This gas station is quite large and pretty nice as far as the gas stations go in this area. Up until this incident, we had both been in there many times before and were very familiar with the layout. It has both a front and back entrance, as well as a sort of little tucked away cutout in the wall with seating. It's located by the back door, so you can buy a sandwich or whatever and sit down and eat it. This little seating area, it's rectangular and is enclosed by 3 walls. One large table at the back with 3 chairs and 2 much smaller tables on the other 2 sides, each with 2 chairs. For you to get to and from the back door, you have to walk right past it as well. Now, we came in through the back entrance, walking directly past the seating cutout to our right, so that we could get to the larger part of the gas station and get our things. Both of us made note that, aside from the 2 workers behind the counter, there wasn't anyone else in the station at this stage. After we found what we needed, we checked out, and during that time we had made some small talk with the workers. I was finishing up the conversation when my sister started walking toward the back door, and because of this she was ahead of me by maybe about 20-ish feet by the time that I started after her. And when she reached the door, she looked over her shoulder at me. It sort of struck me as odd that she was checking to make sure that I was following her, because I knew that she knew that I was. I walked into the view right side of the table in the seating area, and I understood why she looked to make sure that I was following. The moment that it came into my line of sight, I was filled with this guttural, instinctual fear. It's difficult to describe what it felt like because it was so different than anything that I've ever experienced before. But whatever it was shaped like a human, sitting in a chair, back to the wall with its arms resting on the table in front of it. The only 2 details both of us can remember, without a doubt, is that it had long black hair and was holding something that looked to be like cup-shaped between its hands. I never looked directly at it, but it looked at me, stared at me. I could feel its gaze on me as I continued to walk past it. After I reached the door, we both quickly walked out to our car, and after I started the car, my sister realized that we had forgot to grab the car charger port. She suggested that she just run back in and grab one really quickly, but we shot down that idea as well. I mean, neither of us wanted to go back in because of the creepy guy sitting at the table. So we decided to stop at the next gas station instead. We went on with our day, not talking about or even really thinking about the gas station guy again. Honestly too, I completely forgot about it in the end. And it's been that way for the past 2 weeks. Until Saturday, when my sister was staying at my place for the weekend, did we talk about it. And the weirdest thing is that neither of us can remember this thing having a face. No eyes, nose, mouth, nothing in fact. Just that it had black hair, was holding something cup-shaped, and was without a doubt watching us. Its silhouette and face were blurred, I guess, like an unfocused camera lens. Neither of us can remember any of the details, like what the colors it was wearing were, or even if it had legs or whatever, but both of us felt the same horrible feeling from it, and neither of us looked it directly in the face, only through our peripheral. We didn't choose not to look at it, mind you. We just felt like we couldn't. Both of us just sort of instinctively knew not to look at it, I guess, and as we were walking around getting our things, both of us would come into view of the table multiple times, and never once did we notice anyone sitting back there. I mean, if it was sitting at the table the whole time, then we definitely would have noticed. And at no point when we were there did anyone enter or leave the station. Like I mentioned earlier as well, we're both extremely observant people, and we definitely would have noticed. At least one of us would have. And the even more messed up part is that the way that it was sitting and the table size just didn't make any sense. The table is very small and is always pushed up against the wall, and it was sitting in between the wall and a large, long table in place of where the other table should have been. Neither of us have been there since, so it could have been possible that they changed the layout or something, and that was just the first time that we had seen it. Possible, I suppose, but very unlikely. So on Sunday morning, we go to check to see if they had changed the layout, and it is exactly as we remember it. One big table and two much smaller tables. Which means that it was in fact impossible for it to have been sitting like that. I honestly believe that it was something else. What it was, I have no clue, but it absolutely terrified me. My house has been in my family for around 2 generations now, so it's a little bit old. Maybe 80 years, I would guess. Probably more, though. Anyway, everyone who lives or has lived or stayed for an extended period of time in my house has experienced something unexplainable that we just chalk up to ghosts. My family, they're pretty spiritual too, or just enough where it's above the normal person. As in, we sage and use incense to cleanse when the vibes get bad. We're open to the thought of ghosts and spirits and all that stuff. And stuff like give to the universe and you get back, that sort of thing. But that's pretty boring, and I'm moving soon to a brand new house that's been built, so I'm going to lose all the ghost buddies that have terrorized or taken care of me my whole life. And so I thought that I would share some of the highlights that I've had here. So, laying in bed one night, late, and trying to get to sleep, I have my foot out of my covers and slightly hanging off of the bed, when something grabs it and pulls. I get tugged literally off of my bed, and my bed moved a whole half a meter. I was obviously scared beyond belief because nobody was in my room, and before that my dog literally refused to come into my room. I just slowly went back onto my bed, curled up into a ball under my covers, and didn't sleep that night. On another night, I go back into my back area or laundry to see my brother's ex-partner standing at the top of the stairs looking pale and terrified as she calls out for my brother. I come up from behind her and ask what she's doing. She jumps a bit but calms down, and eventually my brother comes back upstairs. My yard is pitch black at night, so I assumed that she was wondering where he was or something. Until later when I found out that apparently she saw an old-looking lady in like a Victorian-style dress near the tree in my backyard, just sort of standing there. Everyone in my house has had some sort of an experience of her. My experience with her is I was getting clothes off of the line and she was just there, staring at me. I nearly had a heart attack when I saw her, but anyway. Another night I entered my room and it was really hot that night, like boiling hot, but it was winter. I'm Australian, living in a tropical area, so I'm used to the heat, but in the winter it never really goes above like 20 degrees Celsius, which is freezing for me, and I had a really negative and sort of heavy atmosphere all of a sudden. I was so tired and it was after work, so I just said, yo, you can get out of here right now, it's not the right time and all that sort of thing. And after a couple of seconds, my room cooled down and just sort of went back to normal. Like a drastic temperature change over a few seconds. On another occasion, I was in my shower one time at 11 p.m. when I heard my mum laughing right outside of the door. I sort of froze and went dead silent because she usually goes to sleep at 8 p.m. After a couple of seconds of silence, I hear footsteps walking away from the door into my backyard. Then I hear my dog absolutely book it through my laundry. Bathroom is in the laundry, mind you. Down the stairs and start barking and screaming her head off. She has 3 types of barks. Her playful, high-pitched one, her warning one when someone's just walking down the street, and then her guard dog one that's loud, deep, and terrifying. And she was definitely in her guard dog mode. My younger sister has a lot of stories of her toys just sort of flying off the shelves in her old room, and back when I was in that room, the same thing had happened. What also happened though was the closet. That room is the only one with a built-in closet. It's also the smallest room, but it was opening and closing throughout the night. And let me tell you guys, I'm currently 16 and I still struggle to open and close it, since the little slidey bits are all rusted and the door is really heavy. As a child, my grandfather died. Great-grandfather, we just call him Grandpa though, and after his funeral I was sitting on my bed and crying to myself because, well, I missed him. Plus, this was my first experience with mortality like this. 2 people enter my room and start comforting me. I recognized one was my grandpa, but I had absolutely no clue who the second person was. That was until a couple of years later I saw a photo of my grandma, Grandpa's wife, and realized that it was her. She died before I was even born. All my life I've been told that she's my guardian angel and is the reason why I get into so much deathly situations and always come out alive and completely okay. My middle name is her name, which is a nice little thing, but her name is my middle name because when I was born, a couple of hours after, when my grandpa got to see me, I apparently gave him a look that my grandma used to give him all the time, and he went, "Man, she looks like her," or something like that. So they made my middle name her name. At night, you would always hear footsteps walking down my hall. Either it's the house settling or it was definitely somebody walking. Something was going on for sure, and most of the time you could hear the distinct footsteps. Sometimes I would also hear the sound of my dead dog crying. That kind of freaked me out, but if I have my hand hanging off of my bed at night, I could always feel someone holding it. Not doing anything bad, but they would just hold it. Sometimes I would also feel that feeling of someone brushing their thumb over my knuckles. It was kind of nice, I guess. It's not nice, however, when I get the feeling of hot breath on my hand. My house is 2 stories. The story has the formerly front room, which is now my brother's room and my pop's workshop. We live upstairs, about 8 or so meters up. I'm not great at estimating though, so yeah, I think it's about 8 meters. But the tapping at the windows is especially weird, and I really hate it. I also hear knocks on my door all the time. I know better than to open my door when I hear 3 knocks, but sometimes I hear rapid, loud knocking on my door, and when I open it, there's never anything there, which is very weird. And the final little thing about my house, which is more sad than scary, I guess, but my pop died last month, and he spent a lot of time under the house in his workshop doing stuff since he was a builder. Nobody can go under there now since there's a heavy feeling of being watched down there. Not watched in a bad way, but just sort of watched, like somebody is observing you. Honestly, I hope he is watching over us, but I also hope that he was able to pass on peacefully. Anyways, that's some stuff that has happened in my house that I can remember, and I hope that if you've listened to the end here that you've enjoyed it. I mainly write this for myself since I get really paranoid the moment that ghosts and stuff are brought up. This is like exposure therapy, I guess you could say, confronting my fears or like acknowledging it. I don't know, but it felt good, and I hope this helps me feel peaceful at night at the very least. And I hope it didn't have just the opposite effect and I won't be able to sleep again tonight. So, wish me luck. I have had many paranormal encounters over the years. I find them fascinating in a sort of frightening way, I guess, if that makes any sense. This experience, however, was absolute pure terror for me. For context, I need to explain our local legend. So I'm from a tiny town that you really only know about if you live here, are close to here, or know someone here. On the outskirts of this tiny town is where I live. This is also where a back road known as the Bank is. This road is extremely windy and narrow, the type of narrow that you have to lay over as far as you can on the rare occasion that another vehicle is oncoming. It's surrounded by thick forest as well on one side of a steep bank that leads to the creek on the other. Now, local legend says about 60 or so years ago, a woman was traveling alone on this road late one night. It's believed that she fell asleep at the wheel and ended up going over that bank. Her car was found close to the creek, horribly mangled. Sadly, she or her body was never found though. Some say that she went through the windshield into the water. Others say that she stumbled out of the car into the water. Regardless, it's believed that she met a watery grave. The creek in this area, it's said to be bottomless, and that's why she was never found. So after this, there were many reports of others driving along this road after dark and seeing a woman standing alongside of the road, only to vanish when they would slow down. Others swore that a woman would just appear in their car as they were driving solo down the dark road. There were so many tales of this ghostly woman that she became known as the Lady of the Bank. Now, jumping to a few months ago, I had attended a gathering at a building in this area. I was told that there was a wreck on the main road though, and that the road was temporarily being blocked off. I was tired and I just wanted to get home at this point, though I felt horrible for those involved in the accident, obviously. And so I decided to take the bank instead, as it would take me past the accident and lead me out just a couple of miles from my house. Mind you, I have driven this road many times before, mostly in daylight, a couple of times after dark, but never alone. Of course, I was told the stories of the Lady of the Bank often growing up, but that honestly wasn't in my mind this night. I had other stressing matters taking up my thoughts as I drove. I had my music playing at a low volume as I was sort of carefully gliding through the curves. The only road-related issue that I did worry about was hitting a deer at this stage, but my thoughts were sort of harshly interrupted by a loud dinging noise 3 times. My heart jumped to my throat as my eyes darted over the inside of my car when I noticed the seatbelt, the icon for it, lit up. And then I finally realized that it was the alarm that somebody else was in the car and that they weren't wearing their seatbelt. I was confused as I checked to make sure that my seatbelt was securely wrapped around me and fastened in place. Just as the loud dinging started again, I once more glanced over to the passenger seat and I nearly fainted. There was a figure in the passenger seat just sitting there. All I really could make out in that split second that I noticed them was long, dark, wet-looking hair, mostly covering the person's face as they appeared to be looking forward out of the windshield. I remember a scream leaving my throat as I slammed on the brakes. The car skid to an abrupt halt, causing me to lurch forward, then being pushed back by the seatbelt. I can remember my heart beating in my ears as I looked up and then slowly over to the once again empty passenger seat. The annoying as hell dinging stopped and the seatbelt icon was no longer glowing in the dashboard. At that point though, I didn't want to stick around. I stomped on the gas, deer no longer being my biggest concern at that moment. I eventually made it home without further incident, other than the anxiety attack that still lingered. I've since told this story to a few of my family, friends, and locals. They all believe that the lady of the bank tried to hitch a ride home with me that night. And while my heart certainly goes out to her, I will not be taking that road after dark ever again. I was born in the early 90s. My parents were married in 1991 and I was born in 1992. For the first bit of my parents' marriage, they lived in a tiny apartment that needed a lot of work. When my mum found out that she was pregnant with me, finding a better home with more space moved to the top of their to-do list. My mother was about 7 months along with me, and every house that they had looked at had fallen through. Until the one. It was located out in the middle of nowhere in our little town, but that's exactly what my parents wanted. It was a 2, could be 3 bedroom and 1 bath house. It had 2 enclosed porches, a massive kitchen or dining area, and a living room as well. The best part though was that the rent was just barely over the amount that my parents were paying monthly for this tiny rundown apartment. And while this wasn't a beachside luxury mansion by any means, it was everything that my parents wanted and then some. So of course, they jumped on this offer. It didn't take long after moving in though for the weirdness to start. Activity made itself known pretty much from day one. This experience in particular, I can remember even though I was only about 3 or 4 years old. So Halloween has always been a major holiday for my family. My parents decided to host their first annual Halloween party in this house as well, and it was a huge success. Tons of family and friends attended. They had music, food, games, costume contests. I remember that I was Baby Bop from Barney, and the best part was that a fake haunted house was in the garage, and it sat apart from the house, and we had a ball with it. After this was all over, my mum's 2 sisters and her middle sister's boyfriend, they decided to sleep over instead of making the hour-long drive back home so late. My parents made the living room floor, which was in between my parents' room and what was considered my room, as cozy as they could. Now, at about 2 in the morning, we said our goodnights and I followed my parents into their room to crash, as I was absolutely terrified of my room. I remember waking up though to the sound of someone knocking on my parents' closed bedroom door. My dad was dead to the world at this stage, so my mother got up to answer it. I then heard the frantic voice of my older aunt asking where my dad was. My mum opened the bedroom door, more so that she could see my dad completely knocked out in bed. My aunt's voice became even more pleading though, as she asked if they could all move into their room and sleep on the floor. My mum agreed, as my aunt swore that she would explain in the morning. I remember distinctly how excited I was to see my aunts and future uncle move their bedding into the small bedroom to sleep. It was my first sleepover in my young mind. Well, come morning, or later in the morning I guess I should say, we would find out exactly what had happened. My aunt said that after everyone had gone to bed and the lights were out, they started hearing movement coming from my room. At first, it sounded like footsteps walking around the room. Then it started sounding like someone was moving stuff around. It got louder, allegedly like someone was digging through my toy box. Both my aunts and my future uncle were on alert listening to this when creepy music started playing, according to them. They realized that it was the music my dollhouse would play only when you pushed a special button. They were convinced that my dad was behind this, as he's notorious for playing pranks on people. And that's when my aunt ran and knocked on my parents' bedroom door to see if it was somehow his doing. When my mum showed her that he was sound asleep, she said that it felt like her heart stopped, as she could still hear movement coming from my room on the other side of the living room. Well, after this, the experiences in the house got worse, and It was a very long time before my aunt and uncle would even visit again. Just days after this, my parents said that I came running to them late one evening and I was completely inconsolable. I said in between sobs that there was a mean face glaring at me through the living room window. This window being the same area that my family had run from. These are just a few experiences from that terrible house, and there's plenty more that I intend to share in the future, but for now, this will have to do. Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone who is truly crazy? Not just someone who does off-the-wall things or acts differently, but genuinely insane? I have, and it terrified me. Let me back up here a little bit. I will be vague on many details for obvious reasons, but a backstory is absolutely necessary. So I work for a large corporation. I actually have a couple of different bosses, but the one that I formed a genuine friendship with is the one that we call Jeff. Jeff is a very laid-back, go-with-the-flow type of guy with a great sense of humor. I also should explain that he is single with no children. Now, not long after I started working with the company, we became friends and he often steps by my desk just to chat a bit. It was about a year ago, though, that he stopped by one morning and I immediately knew that he just wasn't himself. He seemed distant and stressed, which is very unusual for him. When I questioned what was wrong, he told me that he needed to speak with me about a situation. Of course, I was immediately concerned, and so I urged him to go on. He explained that a few years ago, long before I started at the company, another woman began working at the company, and she was not in our department, but did work with our company that required her to interact with leadership in our area, including Jeff. Her name was Lauren. He explained his interactions with Lauren were not often, but she was polite and professional when they did need to speak. He said that she worked for the company for less than a year and then left as she announced that she was getting married and moving. And that was that. He didn't encounter her again until a couple of weeks prior, when he received a friend request from her on social media. He explained that he didn't think much of it and accepted it, as he was Facebook friends with many colleagues, both past and present. She then messaged him later on after accepting the request. He said that he chatted back with her initially as she seemed to just want to catch up a bit, and he learned that she had divorced and wanted to move back to our town. The conversation carried on normal until she asked if he would join her for dinner when she came back to town to visit in a couple of days. Jeff explained politely and declined her offer, and at first she took it well. But then it all went downhill from there. He stopped responding shortly after declining the dinner invitation, and within a few hours he received erratic and insulting messages from her. Everything from calling him names to saying that she was the best thing that he could hope for and he blew any chance with her. He actually let me read some of these messages myself right then. He honestly felt that they were just drunk texts, but still bothered him, and so he blocked her. He figured that that was the end of it as well. How very wrong he was, though. She then began emailing both his personal and work email, pleading for another chance, saying that she was drunk and didn't mean it, saying that she needed to see him, and so on. I would get to read a lot of these myself when I would later be asked to print these off for him for evidence, but the reason he was telling me about this that particular day was because he had received a message request from Lauren's sister saying that she needed to talk to him about Lauren and it was urgent. He accepted and responded to Beth, and Beth told him that apparently something had snapped in Lauren when she went through her divorce and she became fixated on a man that she called Jeff. Beth explained that she had tried to talk some sense into Lauren when everything fizzled out with the initial conversation with Jeff, but Lauren wasn't having it. Lauren told Beth that he was her soulmate and she was going after him. All this led to Beth explaining that Lauren had flown into our town and was staying at a hotel close to our company and was coming to see him at work, apparently. And Jeff said that he found out what Beth had said was true when he came in and found Lauren standing outside of his office. She immediately ran to him when she saw him and pulled him into an awkward hug. Jeff said that he smelt alcohol all over her and he immediately pulled away. She explained that she was here to get her old job back and needed to see him. She also brought him gifts that included gift cards, snacks, and a picture of herself. Jeff refused these gifts, but she became more forceful and insisted that he keep them. Jeff got away from her shortly after saying that he had a meeting. He went to HR to explain the situation and how he absolutely did not want her being employed there again. He provided me with a copy of the picture that she had left for him and said that if I saw her anywhere around the company property to notify security immediately. Beth later sent Jeff a picture of Lauren dressed as a man that Lauren had sent to her saying, "I'm wearing a disguise so that I can watch him without him knowing it's me." Again, this was nearly a year ago and things only escalated from here. Lauren made multiple trips back to our town but would try to catch Jeff in the parking lot. He would find multiple letters on his vehicle from her. Sometimes they made no sense at all. She once left him 2 letters that said the exact same things word for word, but one was in cursive and one was in print. Jeff blocked numerous email accounts only for her to make new ones. She professed her love to him, begged him to want her, stated that she made him her beneficiary if anything was to happen to her. She even sent emails that were clearly from her but claimed to be other men that wanted her and needed him to release her so that she could love them instead. Again, I got to read all of this when printing evidence. She eventually got his personal cell phone number somehow too, and began calling and texting him constantly. He would block the numbers, only for new ones to come through. This eventually ended up in court and a protective order was granted. This did bring things to a halt for a while. Jeff was finally himself once this occurred, as he had become a shell of himself, really. I genuinely felt horrible for him, in fact. That was until this week. On Monday morning, Jeff came by my desk and I could tell right away that he was not happy. Before I could say a word, he demanded to know who placed all those letters on his desk. Obviously, I was confused and I had no clue what he was talking about. I said as much and he explained that there was a thick stack of letters and handmade Valentine's cards on his desk from Lauren. We later found out that they had been stuffed under his door and the housekeeper found them scattered on his office floor when she went to go in and clean it. She didn't know what they were there for, and so she picked them up and neatly placed them on the desk. This was as troubling as it was figuring out how she got into the building in the first place. Well, shortly after, Jeff returned to his office to finish up some things before taking the letters to the police station. I was working away at my desk when I received a call from Jeff. Upon answering, I heard an almost panicked Jeff saying that she's here. He explained that he got a knock at his office door and opened it to find her on the other side grinning at him. He said that he told her that he was calling the police and slammed the door in her face and locked it. He called the police and then called me to inform me that she had been there and the police were on their way. I foolishly assumed that she'd bailed after he told her that he was calling the cops. So I got up from my desk and headed down to the hall to Jeff's office to check on him and wait on the police with him. And I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw her. She was sitting on the floor outside of his office door, humming to herself. She slowly turned her head to look at me. I struggled to explain the knot that formed in my stomach as our eyes locked. She looked a lot like the picture Jeff had previously given to me, but her eyes were just different. They were dark. There wasn't that lively spark that you would often see in people's eyes. It was like they were hollow, void of any normalcy. Her lips slightly twitched up into a smile. She then slowly turned her head back towards Jeff's door and she resumed her humming. Well, as you can imagine, that was enough for me. I booked it. I darted back to my desk. Thankfully, the police arrived shortly after this and she didn't put up a fight. Instead, she calmly allowed them to arrest her and walked away willingly with them. Still humming, mind you, they informed us afterward. She is still in jail for violating the protective order. Jeff and myself are both still very shaken by that experience. And honestly, I will never forget that look in her eyes, staring into an abyss of true insanity. So I clean abandoned houses for a living, and I'm quite proud of myself as I've worked hard starting my own business at just 24 years old and building it to what it is now. I specifically targeted these types of cleaning jobs as you can charge much more than your average 1 to 3 times per week house cleaning jobs of inhabited homes. Plus, I rarely ever have to see anyone other than my team while on the job, which is always nice, for me anyway. Over the years, I have really been in some insane situations with these houses. Everything from encountering wild animals to once a deranged squatter taking up residence in the homes that I clean. There is one house, though, that stands out from the rest, however. One that honestly haunts me to this day. I got the job offer through a real estate agent that I made my friend over the years in this business. It's a small home, not much clutter left. A mailer, my real estate friend said over the phone. Shouldn't need more than 1 or 2 of you to complete the clean, she continued in her enthusiastic voice. I rolled my eyes. I hated when she used her customer service voice on me. Yeah, what's the real deal with this house? I answered in my usual half-annoyed tone. She responded more normal this time. Honestly, Laurie, this house gives me the creeps. The granddaughter inherited it a couple of years ago, but has just recently decided to sell, and the grandmother apparently died in the home too. I rolled my eyes again. Death in the houses I cleaned was nothing new to me, and she was well aware of this. Amelia continued. I cut my pre-visit to the house short last week. I didn't even make it up the stairs where the grandmother apparently passed. It was just the feeling of being watched was overwhelming in this one. That got my attention. Amelia had been in real estate longer than I had been in the cleaning business, and she took her pre-get-to-know before showing visits very seriously. Anyway, I recommended your cleaning services to the granddaughter, and she agreed right away. Do you want to accept it? She finished. Yeah, I'll accept the job. How soon can we get to the clean? I answered, feeling somewhat excited. Let me just check. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. As I mentioned, the granddaughter removed most of the clutter from the house, but it still needs a good TLC cleaning. The key will be left under the welcome mat, she said, back in her customer service voice. My eyes rolled yet again as I ended the call. Finally, an interesting clean, I thought, as I then dialed Morgan. The next day, my most trusted cleaner and best friend, Morgan, and myself drove up the horribly overgrown driveway and saw the well-aged small house come into view. Surely they'll need to hire an outside maintenance and renovation crew, I thought as I climbed out of my cleaning van. Morgan whistled as we stepped onto the small creaking porch. You sure just you and I can handle this, Laurie? Morgan asked as I fetched the house key from the weathered porch mat. If the outside is anything like the inside, we're probably going to need the whole team. Morgan stated as she stood behind me. Amelia's over the top, but would never underestimate a cleaning job. I answered as I slid the key into the old lock and turned until I heard the lock give way. I then pushed the door open as it made the usual ominous creaking noise. We were both silent as we stepped into what I assumed was the small living room. The musty smell of a far too long closed-up house filled my nose as my eyes scanned the darkened room. Just as Amelia had said, not much was left in the room. A couch took up most of the room on the right. A small wooden coffee table sat directly in front of it, coated in a thick layer of dust. I noticed a few photographs still clung to the walls. "Let's get the supplies from the back of the van and get started," I said over my shoulder to Morgan. "I have dinner plans today and I want this done long before." A bit later, I was scrubbing the dirty windows of the living room while Morgan opted to start upstairs. "Laurie?" I heard Morgan call from up the stairs located just behind me. "Yeah?" I called back. It was silent for several minutes as I waited for a response. I felt my aggravation growing as Morgan didn't respond. I threw my rag on the floor and wiped my sweating brow as I turned and headed towards the stairs. Each step groaned beneath my feet as I climbed to the upper floor. "You better have a good damn reason for interrupting me and not answering," I yelled as I reached the final step. Suddenly, though, goosebumps covered my skin when I stepped onto the old wooden floor of the upper level. "Weird," I mumbled to myself as I looked around. The upper level was a small hallway. 2 rooms were located on each side as I peered down the dark corridor. "Morgan?" I called in a softer voice this time. No answer. I slowly headed down the hallway, wishing that I had thought to bring my flashlight. I always hated working with no electricity, but it came with the job. I could see the light of day from the open door on the left side of the hall. The other door on the right was closed. As I looked into the open door on the left, I saw Morgan standing still at the bed located on the far side of the room. "It moved," Morgan said in an almost whisper. "Huh?" I answered as I walked in and stood beside her. "The bed. It moved on its own while I was cleaning the floor," Morgan said, still staring down at the bed. I then noticed that the bed was crooked now. The bottom was several inches away from the wall, where the top was still flush with the corner of the wall. "Do you see it?" Morgan then said, even softer now. I almost couldn't hear her. Instead of questioning her, though, I looked down towards the bed that her eyes were glued to, and I instantly saw what she was talking about. There was an imprint on the bed, the shape of a body, almost as if someone was laying on the bed at that very moment. The chills were really covering my body now, and I felt myself actually shivering. It felt like someone was staring up at us directly from that bed. I slowly reached for Morgan's arm and gently pulled her towards me. "Hey, let's go back downstairs. We'll finish the bottom floor together," I said, matching her whispering tone. Morgan didn't respond, but obeyed my request. The feeling of eyes on us did not leave us as we headed down the small hallway to the top of the stairs. In fact, I had to fight the urge to run down the flimsy steps in the end. Once we were safely down in the living room, the air somehow felt easier to breathe, if that makes any sense. "What the heck was that?" Morgan demanded, finally sounding more like herself. I ignored that question. "Look, you know I hate skimming on jobs, but let's get this level done and get the heck out of here." I grabbed my cleaning supplies and headed to the next room, which was a small kitchen. Morgan stayed close beside me as we just worked in silence, cleaning the sink, counter, and the cabinets. We both instantly froze, though, after hearing what sounded like footsteps above us. "Don't," I said in a warning tone as I went back to cleaning dust and mice droppings from the cabinet. Morgan again obeyed, and she stayed silent as she went back to work on the counter. The footsteps, they continued moving around above us, on and off, as we quickly finished the kitchen. The last room branched off from the kitchen that appeared to be a small office. I was so relieved that we would be out of there soon. This room had stained and worn down carpet covering the wooden floor. I turned on our rechargeable vacuum and the loud buzzing sound almost deafened me, but honestly, I was kind of glad for it. Working in that eerie silence was not normal for us, as we usually chatted and listened to music, but I was too rushed to fool with conversation or a playlist right now. What the actual hell? I heard Morgan yell out over the sound of the vacuum. I jerked my head up to see Morgan staring at the ceiling, looking terrified again. Just as I cut the vacuum off, I heard what she had been referring to as the buzzing sound died down. Now, I can only explain it as the choking or coughing, gurgling sound of like an elderly person. It was only for a split second that I heard it, but that was enough. I yelled, "Screw this," as I grabbed up as many of our supplies as I could. Morgan joined me in grabbing up the rest. We dashed out of the office, through the kitchen and the living room, and out the front door. I was pretty much sprinting to the van while trying not to trip on the mess of the yard. Just as I got to the van, I heard Morgan shout, "Wait." I turned to see her a few feet behind me. I left my supplies upstairs. We also didn't finish cleaning up there. We didn't even clean the bathroom, which must be up there. You know what? I'm not charging the client for that. We can buy you whatever supplies are left. Let's just get out of here. I didn't wait for a response as I jumped into the driver's seat. Morgan hurried and threw the supplies in her arms in the back, and she slammed the door. I took one final look at the house as she slid into the passenger seat. And while I certainly couldn't be sure, but it almost looked like somebody was peering out of one of the two upper windows. I started the van. Hearing it roar to life was pure heaven in that moment. I floored it out of the driveway and back into town. I later called a mailer to explain the job was not complete and I would not be charging. That the granddaughter would have to find somebody else to clean that nightmare. This was a couple of months ago, and I was not kidding when I said that this horrid house, it still haunts me. In fact, it was only last night that I dreamt that I was in a bed, staring at an old, cracked and familiar ceiling. I felt weak and frail as the weight of someone crawling on top of me took the air from my lungs. I felt cold hands around my throat, squeezing tighter and tighter, that awful gurgling, choking sound coming from my mouth being the last thing that I heard as I woke up in a cold sweat. And weirdly, as I was getting ready in the morning, I noticed that there seemed to be some marks around my throat that are still visible. I got home around midnight, almost 1 a.m. from work. My neighborhood is usually dead quiet around that time. I live in a small suburban area where no one's ever really out late. I've been working late nights at the bar for the past 3 years, and in all that time, I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen someone else out walking that late, if at all. So, seeing anyone on the sidewalk at that hour immediately felt out of place. I was sitting in my parked car in front of my house, talking with my boyfriend on the phone before heading inside, just unwinding, not thinking much of anything. Out of pure habit, I glanced at my driver's side rearview mirror, and that was when I saw someone. I saw the swaying movement of legs, and I noticed a bright light bouncing with each step, lighting up the ground beneath them. It looked like it might have been a phone flashlight, but whatever it was bright. As soon as they reached the sidewalk, they stopped, and then the light lifted, deliberately, perfectly, and aimed straight into my mirror, right at me. I got chills instantly. Still on the phone, I frantically told my boyfriend to hang on while I searched for my keys. My hands were shaking. I couldn't find my keys fast enough. I don't know why, but I felt like if I looked up again that the light would be closer, that whoever was holding it would be right next to my window. After what felt like an eternity, I found my keys, started my car and bolted out of that neighborhood. As I turned the corner, the light faded from view. I tried to explain to my boyfriend, but I was so scared that all I could think about was putting distance between me and that block. The direction that they were walking, there's a large cluster of mailboxes that they could have possibly ducked behind, but aside from that, there really was nothing else there. No cars, no fences, no trees, just open sidewalk. Even the blocks that I passed on the way to my boyfriend's, I didn't see a single person. To think that they could have been hiding like they got caught terrifies me, though. I don't know what I saw, but the way that light aimed perfectly at my mirror, it felt intentional, predatory. Maybe it was paranoia. I do read a lot of horror after all. Maybe my brain was spinning stories because I started to doubt myself as I drove away, but my reaction of seeing that light and really hoping that that person would just keep walking is what lets me know that it was not safe. I've always been into paranormal stuff, and I saw my friend posted his encounter that happened in my house, so I've decided to tell you guys my story too. It was 2014 when I first moved into that old house in Selfoss, Iceland. My family and we had mixed feelings about it right from the start though, but we brushed it off as just our imaginations. I guess it was easy to ignore that eerie sense of being watched, considering that we all felt it in every house that we'd ever lived in. But this one, it felt different. There was something more to it, something that we couldn't explain. I've always been sensitive to these kinds of things, even as a kid. I remember when I was 4 years old crying to my mum about an ugly man that I'd see at night. That face has always been stuck in my mind, a shadowy figure that haunted my dreams and never left me alone. As I grew older, I began to see him more and more as well, and by the time that we moved into this new house, I could feel him again, watching from the shadows. I was used to it by then, but the house itself seemed to have its own presence too. It wasn't just me who noticed it as well. It was the little things, I guess. The sounds of footsteps upstairs when we were all downstairs. My mother and my siblings would look at each other, knowing full well that no one else was up there. The first time going into the attic and having a strong feeling like we were being watched, a cross with Jesus hanging over the window and a creepy mask just laying there, but the most unsettling thing happened one morning when a family friend stayed over. She was in the living room, and as she was just waking up, she heard someone run down the stairs. Confused, she asked my brother if it was me, but he told her that I'd already left for school. I hadn't even been home yet, to be honest, but the kids' toys suddenly turned on and they were playing their music. We even have video of this. Then, the voice of an old woman would whisper, sometimes just in our ears and just saying hello, or if we were staying up late, she would tell us to go to sleep, and we all knew that whoever that was, that they were not actually there and had passed away here. There was even talk of someone else, though I never really figured out who. I also had an old alarm clock, one that would ring so loudly that it would wake the whole house. And one morning, as it went off, I woke up, but I just couldn't move. There in the corner of my room stood the same shadowy silhouette of a man, just like the one that I'd seen as a kid. I froze in terror. I couldn't move, and it felt like it was getting closer, but before I could even react, my brother opened the door, drawn in by the sound of my alarm. And just like that, the figure vanished. Strange occurrences kept happening too, like one night I was in the living room preparing to eat dinner in front of the TV. I turned off the lights, the TV on, and as soon as I pulled the table closer, the lights flickered on and the TV turned off. It happened again and again, each time more unnerving than the last. I'd turn the TV back on, turn the lights off, but as soon as I moved that table, it would reverse. This happened 4 times before I screamed, "Leave me alone." And that's when I heard it. A really loud bang, and it scared the life out of me. I ran to check it out, and the bathroom door, it had this massive crack running right down the center of it. It didn't stop there, though. In my room, the weird things continued. Like my bedroom door would creak open by itself, or I'd hear strange scratching or knocking sounds on my walls. The strange thing, though, was that every time that I knocked back on the wall, I'd hear a knock in return. It was almost like something was trying to communicate with me. And then there were the marks, scratches on my skin, bruises under my ribs, and once even a broken toe. I knew that it wasn't the old lady. She was too gentle, and I always got this protective feeling from her. But the Shadow Man, the one who had been following me since I was a kid, he was getting stronger, more violent. It started to affect my dog, too. He would bark uncontrollably at the corners of the house, growling at thin air, and when I tried to investigate, he would always jump in front of me, blocking my way, as though trying to protect me. He would nudge me back into my room, warning me to stay inside almost, away from whatever was lurking out there. One day, we visited a medium about all this, and she immediately focused on me. With one look, she said that there was a Shadow Man, a dark entity that had been following me all my life. He was trying to get me, were her words, but I couldn't let him. He was strong, allegedly, and I don't know what was happening, but each day felt weirder than the last, and I've tried to ignore it, but it just never stops. It feels like the Shadow Man is always just a step behind me, waiting for me. I always get a weird feeling when talking about him. I feel like my chest is getting heavier even writing this. I really don't know what to think about all of this anymore, and I'm just hoping that someone might have some answers here, or at least a way to make it stop before it gets any worse. Sorry this is all a little bit jumbled as well, and it's long, I know, but I do hope that someone out there may have at least some answers to what this could be and what I could do about it. It has been following me, my mum, and even my grandpa for quite some time now. I'm 51 years old, and I was born in Las Vegas, Nevada in 1973. At the time, my father was in the Air Force, stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, while my mother was pregnant with me. Now, while on vacation leave, my dad and mum and a bunch of their Air Force buddies decided to go hiking late at night into the desert. My father and a bunch of his friends, they all took LSD, but my mum stayed sober and played babysitter for the rest of them, considering that she was pregnant, obviously, but according to my mum, everyone who was tripping on acid started playing Star Trek while looking up at the sky. But she didn't really pay much attention at first, and just thought that everyone was sort of hallucinating. However, at some point, she glanced up at the sky, and here's what she describes to this very day, and she's in her 70s now. There was a circle of lights, probably about 8 of them, super high up into the stratosphere, and they were rotating. She says that she thinks that they are reflective and being illuminated by the sun on the other side of the planet, and not producing their own light source. She says that they would disembark, my word not hers, across the sky to all points of the horizon and do gigantic rotations, and then, after a while, regroup back to the smaller original circle. This continued for several hours. She says that they were doing formations. She grew up Catholic and now is no longer involved in the church, if that lends any credibility. My father is deceased now, but when I was in my mid-20s, I asked him, "Mum says that you guys saw UFOs in the desert." He didn't really want to talk about it because of the stigma back then of sounding like a crazy person, but his response was, "Yeah, we saw some pretty weird stuff out there," and then changed the subject. Mum's exact wording about their experience is, "There's nothing in our military that can move the way that these things did." Also, I just asked her this morning if maybe there were spotlights from a casino out there or something, and she said emphatically no. That these were definitely objects that were so high up that they were barely visible, and they were doing maneuvers as well. I have no reason to believe that either of them are lying to me about what they saw, so I don't know. What do you guys think? When I was 19, I went to Argentina to actually serve as a Mormon missionary. While I was there, I had a few encounters, I guess you could call them, that still really get to me when I think about them today. So, to preface this, there was a cult or religion or a group that called themselves Umbanda. They're different than the Brazilian religion of the same name, and you won't find any information on them. I've tried many times, in fact. Honestly, I could be remembering their name wrong too, but that's what I remember, so let's just roll with it. Anyway, a bit about them is that they had a lot of beliefs and practices that were identical to Mormonism, just darker and much scarier. From the few people that I talked to in my 2 years there, I learned that they believed in a satanic trinity, baptism by immersion in blood. They believed in a holy power given to man, like the priesthood of Mormons, and believed in a demonic hierarchy like archangels and angels. So, there was a lady that we met that was dating someone in Umbanda and was trying to convert her to it. She started feeling watched in her home, heard unfamiliar noises, and multiple times felt something sitting on her bed. She wanted out and asked us to bless her house, so we went to her home with another companionship and a local leader. The house was small, and we sat in the front room, and where I was sitting I could see into the kitchen directly to the back door. We started talking casually, and I don't know what it was, but something just felt off the whole time that I was there. The more we moved into her experiences and religion, the more activity started to go off around us too. Like, first, there were small noises on the walls. These were made of bricks and concrete, mind you. And then next, the back door started shaking. A broom then fell over. The noises on the walls turned to scratching sounds up and down the wall and over our heads. We did everything that we could to ignore everything going on, but there was this dark presence that kept getting thicker in the air. We finally knelt to pray, and the sounds and the movement and the heaviness in the air grew bigger and louder. We ended the prayer with the scratching still happening, air thick with darkness, the kitchen cabinets rattling, and we sat for a minute, and then it was like a balloon popped and the air just felt lighter all of a sudden. The noises stopped and things felt normal for the first time since arriving there. The second experience that I had was we were walking around the streets knocking doors. In Argentina, you can stand at the front of the property and clap loudly. We come across this house about midday. We clap at it, and a lady stumbles out of this little side house. We get to talking with her, and she tells us that the house is the house of her boyfriend, allegedly, and she didn't know how she got there this time. She said that this keeps happening too. She'll fall asleep across town at her place, and then wake up at his house somehow. She shared information about him too, about how he believed in the Umbanda, and there was a circle in the room that she just came out of that he had apparently performed animal sacrifices on. She also told us that her kids were taken from her because she woke up in the middle of the nearby highway trying to get herself hit by a car, allegedly, but she says that it wasn't her or something like that. At this point, I assumed that it was drugs or alcohol, but we kept talking to her and we started moving into religion, and she told us about these awful dreams of her underwater with Lucifer, and he and his host of demons would assault her under the water and all that. Weird, I know, but then we really got talking about religion, and once we brought up Jesus, she just sort of changed. She looked down and her voice deepened, and she would urge us to leave her alone when, not even moments earlier, she was begging for help to get her kids back. Well, we changed the subject and she returns to normal. We go back to religion and the same thing. She looks down and her voice deepened. Both my companion and I could feel an evil presence on her all of a sudden. Any religious talk at that point was met by her looking down and this voice that was almost not like hers. It got so concerning that I remember crouching down trying to look into her eyes and saying, "Look at my eyes and see the light of Christ in me and you'll be healed." This was met by her calling me a liar. Finally, we were uneasy enough that we made eye contact and agreed to go. We dropped religious talk and gave her a pamphlet with our information. We asked if we could say a prayer, and of course she said no. I started saying a little prayer that even a little handshake would heal her, so I go to shake her hand, and I swear to you that I instantly felt all my life force just leave my body, drained instantly. I became numb and my brain and my body just sort of went into autopilot. Well, we leave and my companion said that he experienced the same thing when we left and went around the corner, sat on the curb, and we both just sort of sat there in silence. I think about 3 or maybe 4 hours passed before either of us said anything and we had any energy to talk about our experiences, and they matched. What we felt, what we heard, what the end was like, everything. We called our mission president, and we were told to cross the street off of our map and make a note for future missionaries to not go to that house, and there were other things, but those were definitely the 2 biggest and strangest ones for sure. There was a lady who thought that her house was haunted as well. We did a prayer and a cat popped out, and it scared us and it was kind of funny, but there was also a girl that we were teaching that used a Ouija board with some friends, and it sounded like one of the friends ended up possessed or something, broke a mirror out of nowhere and started writing in blood on the walls and a bunch of nonsense like that. But anyway, all that stuff is just hearsay and I'm not too sure, but the things that happened to me, I can account for, and it was all very weird, very strange, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. So I'm like 10, maybe 11. But either way, my family had recently moved into this house right at the bottom of the Appalachian Mountains. We bought this house from a widow whose husband had passed away in what had been the TV room, but we converted it into a library and stereo room for a custom setup my dad had built about maybe 4 years ago that he was extremely proud of. My brother is 14 or 15 at this time, and we were military brats. My dad had just retired from the Coast Guard, hence why we were living as far away from the ocean as we could. Given that we were under the impression this kind of place is crime-free, and we were used to my brother looking after me, our parents were okay with leaving us home alone. So, it's Saturday or something. We're home alone, and I'm at a risk of being bored out of my skull, so my brother decides to put on some music. He puts on the Cranberries, his favorite band, and starts teaching me to loosen up and just dance a bit. So we're in the music room dancing to the Cranberries' greatest hits, truly a hit down at the club. When it gets to, I think, Linger or Free to Decide, I honestly cannot remember which, but it was about 2000 to 2001, so it wasn't the '08 version of the greatest hits. I know it wasn't Zombie, but anyway, my brother and I are dancing when we hear an old man that we never heard, in the grouchiest voice ever, shout, "Would you turn that stuff off?" And we froze, staring at each other. We'd both heard it, absolutely clear as day, as if he'd been in the room with us. We freak out, turn off the music, and we spend the next 2 hours scouring the roughly 2 acres of land that we had for any sign that someone had been there. There were no signs of any cars, all the windows were closed, no sign that the adamantly unlocked doors had been open, and neither our dog nor our cat were perturbed in any way. Absolutely nothing. We decided that it was a ghost in the end and joked that it was Old Man H, the man who had apparently died in that room. And my brother decides that the best thing that we can do is show the ghost that this is our house now and we'll play whatever music we damn well please. And so we finish the album. Not that much dancing this time though. Anyway, we talk about it a couple of times over the next decade or so once in a while, and we've got a cool ghost story to tell, right? So fast forward about 12 years, my brother had graduated from college and I'm in college, having gone through the ringer a couple of times, so I didn't graduate until I was 24. So 2014, going to college in the upper part of the US, it was a dark, snowy night and I'm going from hanging out eating food at the student center to playing some video games on my computer in my dorm room. Now, what you have to understand is that I'm very cautious about adopting new tech fads. I didn't get a smartphone until after I graduated, for instance, because it seemed like the technology was moving too fast to be worth the abhorrent sums that they cost. But an MP3 player? That had been around since I was a teenager, and they definitely still made them at that point. And so, that was one of the few non-essential to my studies pieces of technology that I decided to purchase. There's not much storage on it, so I loaded it up with some reliable tunes that I know that I'll love. Eurythmics, Dr. Steele, Long Live the Toy Soldiers, Aerosmith, before I realized that I don't actually like Aerosmith, and about one audiobook at a time. I was big into the Dresden Files at that time. And of course, the Cranberries' greatest hits. So, like I said, it's a dark, snowy night. It's a gentle snowfall. The streetlights are just bright enough to navigate. A little bit spooky, but in a kind of romantic kind of way, I guess. All in all, I had a pretty good day, all things considered, and it was a good time in my life. I'm listening to the same song on my little MP3 player, and I'm putting my key into the door to my dorm house when I hear as if he was standing and talking directly into my right ear without there being an earbud in the way. That same voice from when I was 11. Are you still listening to this stuff? Now, I am alone. Like alone. Like there probably isn't another person out in the snow at about 10 p.m. for at least half a mile around me at least, even if I am on campus. There's nobody who could have said that, much less anything standing next to me. This isn't the first time that I'd listened to that song that day too, so it wasn't my MP3 player or anything either. I couldn't resist but laughing at the time and say, "Get lost, Mr. H, it's my tunes," and I quickly go to my room. And so, now technically I guess that I have two ghost stories to tell everyone. Back when I was in 6th grade, around 11 years old, I lived in an old apartment that always had a strange vibe. My school bus arrived early in the morning, so I was usually the first one in my house to wake up and get ready. And one morning, while brushing my teeth, I noticed something in the mirror, a black shadowy figure standing right behind me. It was only for a split second, gone before I could even process it. I brushed it off, thinking that my eyes were playing tricks on me. But then it started happening every single day. Each morning, in the same spot, I'd catch a glimpse of that dark figure in the mirror, only ever for a millisecond, but it was there. I convinced myself that it must just be my imagination. I was too scared to acknowledge it because I thought that if it was real and I showed fear that it would only get worse. This continued for 2 weeks. Then, one night I woke up and I saw it again. This time not in the mirror though, but right next to my bed. It had no legs, just a dark, shadowy form. Frozen in fear, I stayed silent, but deep down I felt like it knew that I could see it. Terrified, I ran to my mother's room, desperate to tell her, but she reassured me, saying that it was nothing and that I was just imagining things. Coming from a somewhat religious family, she told me to stay calm and not to overthink it. But the figure kept reappearing. For the next few days, I tried my best to ignore it, but the fear kept building up until one night I just couldn't take it anymore. I broke down crying and finally told my mum everything in detail. That's when she realized that something was really wrong, and without wasting any time, she took me to a temple. Things only got worse though before they got any better. I started having these terrifying nightmares about a presence that felt like a woman. In these dreams, she would whisper horrifying things, saying that she would kill me, that she wouldn't leave this place. The dreams felt so real that I even started dreading sleeping. At this point, strange things were happening in our home too. I used to play all around the house with my RC car, even going into the storeroom without a second thought. But after the shadow figure appeared, something changed. The storeroom just felt wrong, for a lack of a better term. It was always cold, heavy, and just off. I wasn't the only one who noticed it too. Everyone in my family started avoiding that room without even realizing why. And it wasn't just the eerie feeling. Around this time, my family started arguing constantly over the smallest things. The tension was unreal as well, almost like something was trying to turn us against each other. We later found out that the area that we lived in was known for dark magic practices apparently, and our building was apparently built on a British burial ground as well. And so, after realizing all of this, we didn't waste any time. We moved out as quickly as we could. But here's the strangest part. After going to the temple, the priest prayed for me and tied a holy thread around my wrist. And just like that, I never saw the shadowy figure ever again, not even once. Ever since that day, I've never experienced anything like it again. And that's my experience. My sister, though, she had a whole other level of encounters during this time. And if you guys are interested, then do let me know, because I should be able to share them with you all. This is an event that I will never forget, and there is absolutely no way that I could have mistaken this. So, me and my sister were living in a townhouse together at this time. This was about 3 to 4 years ago. We lived in a suburban town where everyone really knew everyone. The town was filled with forests and cornfields, and so when it was nighttime, it did get a little bit eerie. So it was a Friday evening, and my sister and I were fighting over the phone about something minuscule, I guess, but we both work together as well, so you can imagine how heated our arguments can get spending that much time together. Anyway, during the workday we were going at it over text, and it had gotten to a pretty bad point where we may need to separate ourselves. As the clock hits 5 p.m, she leaves the office first. We're still texting and fighting over the phone to the point where I was almost in full-blown rage mode. I take a breather, pack my things, and head off back to the townhouse. I was contemplating going over to my parents' house, who live close by, but at that time I needed to cool down a bit and just be by myself. So as I'm driving, I am completely dreading seeing her there and having to go through yet another argument. But I get to the townhouse, I take a deep breath, and I walk towards the front door, preparing myself for another useless argument. I walk in and head to the kitchen, and thankfully she was upstairs in her room. Her room is located right above the kitchen, and I can hear clear as day a conversation she is having on the phone. And who was she talking about? You guessed it, me. She is calling me every name in the book, talking down on my character and saying downright evil things. At this point, I choose to call my mum to calm me down and tell her about the volatile situation that we're having. I need to talk to her about it in hopes that this argument can be done with. And as I'm talking to my mum, I hear her notice that I'm home, and then she directly starts screaming at me to get the F out, and starts swearing at me and just saying all these really nasty things. I was taken back by the disgusting things that she was saying. She has a very distinct voice that was just piercing through the walls. And so I snapped. I started screaming back, and we're yelling through the ceiling, and my mum is hearing me scream with rage over the phone. She is hearing me going back and forth with her. My mum then yells at me to stop, so I do. And the next words that she said, it just put pure terror straight into me. She quietly and slowly tells me, "Your sister is right next to me. She is with me right now at the house. Who are you yelling at?" And that is when I learned about mimic spirits. An evil spirit was mimicking my sister to enrage and feed off of the energy. So, pray up and be aware. I spend 6 months of the year in the fire lookout station. For privacy's sake, I'm not saying where. Alone with the trees and the sky and nothing else. I'm used to the solitude, and I like it most of the time, to be honest. Backpacking clears my head and makes me less lonely, I guess, but recently I couldn't help but wonder if I wasn't alone. The first time that I saw her, I honestly thought that I was dreaming. It was almost sunset. The light was dying, but I could still look down the trail, and that's when I saw her, standing at the edge of the woods, immobile. She was a woman, dressed in white, shining against the dark woods. I couldn't budge. I stared at her for what felt like forever, and then I blinked and she vanished. At night it rained, and the wind was howling so strongly it seemed like a hurricane had magically appeared outside. The cabin creaked and cracked, and the radio lost power, and then I got a call for help. A tiny fire a few miles down the road, apparently. We put it out, but I couldn't help but wonder if maybe the woman had started it. I tried to forget it. I maybe was just tired or hallucinating or something, and then it happened again. A week or so later, I was watching her from the tower window. She was on the ridge in the same white dress, just staring. My stomach twisted a bit, and I knew something awful was going to happen. That night, the wind came back again, and the old antenna fell over. I was alone for hours without any ability to communicate with the outside world. It's happened a few times now. I just keep seeing her, always off in the distance, always quiet. And every time something goes awry, a storm, a missing hiker, or even a bear that wanders too close. It's almost like she attracts chaos with her, like some sort of specter who brings calamity just for being there. I've tried talking to her, I've even yelled, but nothing. She just stands there. When she's around, too, the air just feels heavy, like everything is holding its breath. But one night, though, it got worse. I woke up to this soft sort of tapping on the cabin door, tapping fingers, so to speak. I was already in a hurry before I got up, and I grabbed my flashlight and began walking slowly towards the door, telling myself that it must just be a branch or something. But the tappings grew louder, and I breathed deeply and opened the door, and there was nothing but the blackness. I swept the light around, but no branches, no wind, just stillness. And then I saw her. She was on the absolute edge of the porch, 10 feet from me. Her dress shone and I couldn't breathe. But her face was the worst part. It was, well, blank, smooth, no features. I instantly dropped the flashlight and it rolled, creating shadows everywhere. Out of nowhere, she screamed, and it was the worst ear-shattering scream that I think I'd ever heard. It felt like it had the power of 1,000 voices all at once. The sound was ringing in my bones, and I put my hands over my ears, but it didn't seem to make any difference. I could have sworn that my head was going to burst, and then, just as it had started, it stopped. I glanced up, and she was gone. The night was once more quiet, as if nothing whatsoever had happened. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I turned on every light and sat in the corner waiting. And I couldn't help but wonder, what if she had moved a little closer? And now, whether I'm in the woods or whether I'm at the cabin, I swear that I can feel eyes upon me. The air is icy and mere sounds make me jump. I just have music on the radio so that I don't feel so alone now. I have no idea if she's warning me or if she's bringing the bad things upon me, but one thing is for certain. I get this queasy feeling every time that I see her, and sure enough, something always goes wrong. Always. Last week, I had a horrific experience. It was the middle of the night, and I woke up to footsteps in my apartment. I immediately got up and walked around, didn't see anyone, realized that my front door was stupidly unlocked, so of course I go unlock it, do another check around the apartment, and I go back to sleep. Now, several hours later, I wake up to the same noises, but this time I stay still and just listen. The noise stops, but my bedroom door opens ever so slightly and I can see the black outline of a person. As you can imagine, at this point I am terrified. I don't move or make a noise and I just wait. Finally, the figure just says 0 in a human voice, and it sounded like any other man. I jump out of bed, turn on all the lights and look around again, but there was nothing. I double-check the locks and this time lock my bedroom door. I sit in my bed for a while, waiting for, something to happen before dozing off again. In the morning, I'm still pretty freaked out, but I go and take a shower, and when I turn the water on, the water is hitting the ceiling. The shower head had somehow been turned completely upside down, and I realized the only place that I didn't check was behind the shower curtain. And I know that I wouldn't have done that. Like, why would anyone turn the shower head 180 degrees around like that? It just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I go about my day and I try not to think about it too much. Flash forward to yesterday, I get into my car in the morning to go to class and my rearview mirror has also been turned all the way upside down. After that, I'm just so confused and spooked. I wondered if maybe I was sleepwalking and turning things upside down or something, but I've never been a sleepwalker in my 22 years, and apparently it's very rare for sleepwalkers to randomly start it in their 20s, almost unheard of in fact. Which is why I'm here. Does anyone know what the heck is going on? I'm not very well versed in the supernatural, so I'm pretty much out of my depth here. Is there some sort of a spirit that turns things upside down like this? Is it a bad omen or something? I would genuinely really appreciate people's thoughts on this. For a bit of backstory first, my husband and I live in an apartment complex with our dog and cat. There's a forest trail behind our complex that leads to a park where we often take our dog. Now, it was a weekday, and I was taking our dog for a bit of a pee while I was on my lunch break. We took the parking lot to the trail right behind the trash compactor for our apartment complex. This trail is usually empty, so walks don't get interrupted with other people and the dog can do his business with minimal distractions. It's very scenic. We have some cross owls, bald eagles, squirrels and the like. The wind goes through the pine trees and we can occasionally hear cars go by on the main road up ahead. It didn't take long to realize that something was different on this day though. You see, we had gone down the trail and stopped at the main road, turned around and started to head back home. The wind seemed to suddenly stop just then, and I couldn't hear the birds that were so loud just a moment ago. It was almost like the silence was loud, if that makes any sense. And that was when I saw it, and I had already walked past it, which is kind of freaky. A man laying on his back 10 feet away in the ivy. Honestly, it didn't even register to me that this was a person at first, so I stopped. I turned around. His eyes were open, his teeth were broken, and he was missing the back part of his head. Now my dog was spooked and somehow wiggled out of his harness. This man, though, was dead. The 911 operator asked if I had a defib in my apartment that I could go and grab and come back. I said no, but that he was definitely deceased. She asked again, "Are you sure? Check, please." That was the first time that I was ever made to touch a corpse. I relayed back, "No, there's no pulse. He's missing most of his head." And as I backed away, I could see copious amounts of blood that I hadn't even noticed at first. It was soaked into the earth beneath him. While waiting for the cops to arrive, I noticed that he had a box next to him. My guess is that this must have been the box that he brought the gun in. He had his glasses neatly folded and had placed them on top of the gun box. He looked no more than 50, and I will never go into those woods ever again. The first time I ever played with a Ouija board was when I was about 11. It was me and two of my friends. Their names were Katie and Taylor. Katie's older sister, Lauren, and her friend, Sam, had us come upstairs. Lauren and Sam had a talking board. Basically, it was a super girly looking Ouija board with a kitty on it. Katie, Taylor, and I laughed but said, "Okay, sure." We all put our fingers on the piece and it pretty quickly started moving across the board. And it spelled out, "Run." My friends and I freaked out and yanked our hands back. Lauren and Sam busted out laughing. They said that they had moved it to just scare us. Katie started yelling at them as they continued to laugh at us. But it was about that time the bathroom light turned off. It made us all jump as it was the only light that we had on, and then it turned back on. Taylor spoke up and said, "Okay, you got us, we're done." But Lauren and Sam seemed genuinely spooked at this point. And then the planchette started to move towards me on its own. At this point, Katie, Taylor, Lauren, and Sam are all standing together opposite me. I say, "Haha, very funny. I saw that coming from a mile away." But when I looked at Lauren and Sam, all I saw was pure fear. They had no color in their faces and were just sort of staring at the planchette, wide-eyed. Sam finally spoke up in a very shaky voice and said, "No, that's not us." And then Lauren very calmly said, "Guys, go now." We all took off downstairs and out the front door. Taylor and Katie started yelling again, saying, "If that was you guys, cut it out and tell us the truth." But by now, Lauren and Sam were on the verge of tears and hyperventilating. That was when I glanced up to the bedroom window. I saw the light in the bathroom turn off, and then that's when I saw a small black figure about my size sprint past the window. Nobody else was in the house, though. Lauren and Katie's older brothers were off both at college, and their dad was still at work, and their mum had to run to the store and wasn't back yet. Katie and Taylor, they slept over at my house that night, and Lauren slept over with Sam. We never spoke about that experience to each other ever again after that, but it wasn't long after that incident that Katie, Taylor, and we had a big falling out. I haven't seen or spoken to Taylor since. It's been about 18 years. Katie and I reconnected a few years ago on Instagram and chat every now and then, but we still never talk about that night. In 2018, I moved into a small 2-story property in England with my then boyfriend. It was in a quiet cul-de-sac, with houses literally crammed together, all facing each other. I am very introverted and I don't typically make a habit of socializing much with neighbors. Still, we naturally ran into a few and exchanged pleasantries when we had to, as you would, right? Now, one of our new neighbors, Greg, was incredibly welcoming right off the bat. He was an older gentleman, the kind who would stop for a chat that would drag on and on until you made up an excuse for why you really had to get going. He shared local stories, asked about and took note of our birthdays, and even invited us around for a garden party where any and all were welcome. His house was directly across the street from where I lived, with his windows in clear view of mine. A couple of years passed by, and during this time, my boyfriend and I split up. Although I never expressly shared this news with my neighbors, word must have gotten around with his car missing from the driveway. He moved out and left the country in the end, but we stayed in touch regularly as friends. Having the house to myself felt, well, lonely, so I got a cat to keep me company. He quickly became, and still is, my world. Greg would often flag me down to talk when he caught me leaving or returning to my house. Annoying, but I could live with it, I suppose. I'd update my ex about weird little interactions with Greg, which we both found amusing to gossip about. But one such incident was when Greg came to my door to hand over 2 of my parcels, one of which was a large table that he had yet to retrieve from his house. I had been raiding in Elder Scroll Online at the time, doing a deathless speedrun for an achievement. Given the time constraint in my game, I told him that I'd leave the door unlocked so that he could simply put it by my door. I sat back down at my desk, put my headset on, and my group charged in at the final boss. I heard my front door opening, followed by the sound of my large parcel being placed down. But then, footsteps approached me from behind. I peered behind me to see Greg standing there, eyes sort of fixed on me. For fear of disappointing my raid group, I continued playing until we killed the boss, and then took off my headset. Greg's face lit up, and he went on to tell me how amazing it was to watch me play. I got the impression that he'd never seen someone use a keyboard, let alone play games. He begged me to teach him and rambled on. He was clearly intoxicated, so I laughed it off and gave a non-committal response. Despite repeated attempts to politely make him leave, he could not be persuaded. He seemed disappointed when I walked over to my door and opened it to clearly signal that it was time to go, but he left without further incident. In the UK, houses often have individual outdoor bins for trash, which have to be rolled out to the street the night before collections take place. You're expected to bring the bins back to your property after collection, and I noticed someone kept bringing my bins back in for me. Was I blocking someone's car by being too slow to do it? Around the same time, I also noticed someone had been using my bins. I brought it up to Greg one time. He pulled me over to talk, and he said the same thing had been happening to him. Maybe it was petty of me, but I decided to tape an old phone with a surveillance app to my window, overlooking the bins to figure out who it was. And lo and behold, it was Greg. I chalked it up to him having run out of bin space after the local council moved from weekly to bi-weekly collections due to staffing issues, and although it bothered me, my desire to avoid confrontation won in the end. Christmas rolled around, and the COVID-19 pandemic was in full swing at this point. But one late evening, I heard a knock at my door and walked over to see who it was. I had no peephole, so I opened the door not knowing what to expect. Greg stood at my doorstep, which was not particularly unusual. I'd gotten all too used to his antics, but I immediately caught a strong waft of alcohol. He spoke before I had time to process. He told me that he had a Christmas present for me and handed over a red gift bag with colored tissue paper covering the contents. I really want to give you a kiss on the cheek, but I can't, not with this pandemic going around, he said. That gave me the heebie-jeebies, so I did all I could to politely end this interaction and retreat back inside. He held me up by rambling on about, well, who knows what, to be honest, but I firmly told him that I was busy and I needed to go. That's when he laid a hand on my shoulder, leaned in, kissed my cheek, and then walked off in the direction of his house. I closed the door and simply stood there for a few moments in shock. The present was odd, too. Underneath the tissue paper were 2 bottles of Belgian beer, a can of half-eaten Pringles, sour cream and onion, and a small plastic bag containing little chocolates. I also recognized the latter item. A next-door neighbor with young children had come around to put these plastic bags with chocolate and a handwritten note, signed with their address, through everyone's mail slots a few weeks prior. It was a sweet gesture and probably something they came up with to keep the stir-crazy kids busy, but upon inspecting the re-gifted chocolates, I noticed that he'd even forgotten to remove the note from the neighbor. This kiss and gift, it definitely gave me bad vibes, and I regretted accepting it. It was at this point too that I decided that I was done being mispolite and resolved to be firm in my future rejections. Now, on the second day of the new year, I was feeling lazy and ordered food delivery. A mere 5 minutes after receiving my order, there was a knock at my door. Knowing that the delivery driver hadn't forgotten anything, I concluded that this had to be Greg. And then it clicked for me. He'd often turn up immediately after anything was delivered to my door, which meant that he was constantly watching my house. Was he dumping trash in my bins as an excuse to hang around my house? He called out for me through the door. I felt too uncomfortable to answer, and I retreated upstairs out of view from the windows. Later that night, he came back and kept knocking too, but once again I ignored it in hopes of him going away. The following day, I contacted the police to file a harassment report. I felt sheepish doing so. I mean, was it really that bad? He was just a lonely old man, and I hadn't been firm enough, probably. Upon being asked whether I wanted the police to speak with him, I told them that I'd do it myself. I just wanted the report on file in case anything else actually happened. I would later become grateful for filing this report, by the way. Greg turned up at my door a few days later, telling me how worried he was about me. I told him, verbatim, I think it's best if we don't have any contact going forward. His response was eerie. I just wanted to be your friend. I held my ground, cut the conversation short, and closed the door. Finally, it's over, I thought. And a year went by without incident. Everything seemed fine, with no knocks on the door or unwanted conversations while I was outside. One night in winter, I was leaving my house to get groceries. It was completely dark outside, save for a lamppost casting some sparse light into the street. My driveway was at the side of my house, where the bins were stored. This driveway was blocked in by a tall panel fence to add some privacy, seeing as the kitchen window was directly next to it. You could see right into my kitchen and living room through this window. As I was outside locking the door, that was when I saw a figure in the dark, slinking out of my driveway and behind the fence. I immediately unlocked the door and went back inside. It was dark. I could have imagined it, but my gut told me otherwise. Was there someone waiting for me behind the fence? Ultimately, I trusted my instincts and decided to forego the groceries for the night. I bought and mounted a motion sensor light to illuminate my driveway too. The memory of the shadowy figure quickly faded in my mind, and the new light gave me some comfort that I'd at least be alerted if someone was lurking outside of my window. A couple of months after the incident, I was in my kitchen getting some food for my beloved cat. The window was directly to my left, around 3 feet away from where I stood. As I dumped the cat food into a bowl, I suddenly became aware of my motion sensor light being on. I scanned the outside, not seeing anything, until my eye landed on something in the bottom corner of the window. I squinted, trying to make out what I was looking at. It somehow wasn't properly illuminated. I kept staring for what must have been 30 seconds. The light outside remained on, when suddenly Greg pops up into view directly outside. He'd been crouched down, peering in from the corner of the window. I'm normally someone who's as cool as a cucumber. I never raise my voice or yell, but I truly lost it at that moment, screaming, "What are you doing?" repeatedly. He just stood there and then nonchalantly asked, "Are you all right?" I kept screaming, but Now it was, "Why are you there?" Then he just turned around and walked off into the dark. I immediately called the police. Typically, the police in England leave something to be desired, but I have to give them credit for how they handled this situation. They took my statement over the phone and gave me a reference number. I received a couple of phone calls with updates and was told that they'd bring him to the station. I was also informed that he was known to the police for having previously followed young women. Sometime later, he was arrested at his property in front of a wife that I didn't even know existed. They did this to scare him, according to the officer that I spoke to make a bit of a point. Sadly, he received nothing more than a police caution, which forbade him from being on my side of the cul-de-sac or contacting me. Still, it seemed to work. The window incident was the last real interaction that I ever had with Greg. I did see him staring at me in the shower from his window one time when I forgot to close the blinds, but other than that, really there was nothing else. Thankfully too, I have since moved far away from Greg, which I am very, very grateful for. I was between 3 and 5 years old, so it was around 1989 to 1991. My room was on the complete opposite end of the house from my parents' bedroom, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night on a regular basis, scared. When I'd wake up, I remember seeing this woman standing at the end of my bed. I could kind of see through her, but she also put off a glow. It was a warm, loving, welcoming, and peaceful glow. She was also wearing a blue tunic and a white headdress. She was always looking down, holding and happily comforting a baby wrapped in a blanket. After a few seconds of having my eyes open, she'd always notice that I was awake and would act surprised, like I wasn't supposed to see her. Then she'd immediately disappear. I never felt threatened by her. I remember the first time that I saw her, I really didn't know what to think, and I pulled my sheets over my head before she disappeared. She really did give off an aura that was comforting, welcoming. The glow coming off of her felt like that, like I knew that I was completely safe while sleeping. This happened quite a few times too, to the point that I'd smile when I saw her after waking up, and she'd look back with a smile that was comforting, yet at the same time also conveyed something like, "You aren't actually supposed to be seeing me," while still intentionally letting me see her for a few seconds before fading away. She felt like a very, familiar mother figure, but it wasn't my mother. I was always scared right after she disappeared though, because that safe feeling would disappear as well, and I'd want to run to my parents' bedroom. I could see my parents' bedroom from the doorway of my room, but you had to walk through the dining room and living room to get to it. But there were also always these strange shadowy figures, dozens of them walking around in the dining room, kitchen and living room. I remember being very scared of them, but I never actually drew their attention while I stood there, watching them from my bedroom doorway, and they never really seemed to notice me or walk toward me too. It seemed that they were always in a hurry though, walking with busy intent but never actually going anywhere. I was always scared of them, even more scared that I'd actually draw their attention, but I wanted the comfort of my parents. I was too scared to run through the shadow people that were walking around, so I'd always scream for my parents from my bedroom doorway. The instant that I would scream, the shadow people would stop walking, then all of them would look up at me with an angry and frustrated aura, but never actually took a step towards me. They'd just disappear about the time that I'd hear either of my parents' voices as my mum or dad walked toward me. One of the last times that I saw the lady at the end of my bed and the shadow people, I wanted to get to my parents' room where they were, but instead of just calling out for them, I just closed my eyes and held out my hands to feel my way across the dining room and living room to my parents' bedroom. I actually made it there on my own. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel them there before they started to disappear, but I could also feel as they were fading away that they were angry because I wasn't as scared of them anymore. I stopped seeing them shortly after that, which was also around the time that I started feeling more comfortable staying in my own bed all night by myself without needing to have my parents close by. But it's one of the most real and vivid memories that I can remember from when I was that age. I'm 38 now, and I still remember exactly what the lady looked like and felt like, and the shadow people too. This wasn't even an old house or anything, though, that you'd really associate with a stereotypical haunted place. It was actually a relatively new double-wide trailer that my mum and dad had put there a few years before I was born. They bought the trailer brand new directly from the manufacturer, and I feel like what I saw and felt had to be real though, because a 3 to 5-year-old wouldn't have been able to imagine that physical feeling from her aura that was so welcoming. It was a distinct physical feeling that a 3 to 5-year-old wouldn't have been able to just randomly imagine. A feeling that I still somehow remember. I never did see anything like that again in that place, or any other place that I've lived. I haven't experienced anything paranormal since, and I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I work at a condo complex by the beach. I've been here for about 3 years, and my co-workers, who have been here for 10 plus years, always talk about seeing and hearing spooky stuff. To give you some background, I'm a skeptical believer. In the past 3 years, I've never had anything happen that I couldn't debunk. Until tonight, that is. I have a radio that I carry with me when there are 2 of us working. Normally, I'm here by myself, so I don't usually have it on me, but this night I did. While waiting in the lobby of the 2nd floor for the elevator, the radio suddenly kicked on, like someone was trying to talk. I took it out of my pocket and heard a faint little girl's voice saying, "Can you see me?" twice, followed by, "I'm right behind you." My initial thought was that my co-workers were playing a joke on me, so I just put the radio back in my pocket. When I got back to the guard shack, I told my co-worker that it was a funny prank. He looked at me though, and he's not the type to lie, and said that he had no clue what I was talking about. So apparently I had my first paranormal experience. I spoke to my boss this morning too and told him what happened. He wasn't surprised as well, and said it normally happens on the 6th floor. He mentioned that he has seen and heard 2 little kids running up and down the hallways, and that they have messed with the radio before. He asked around, but no one knows anything about any kids passing away here. However, this building has been here since 1974, and was one of the first condos built in this area. This is more of my dad's story than mine, but I still think that it's good to share it. In August of '06, my family was stationed at Fort Riley in Kansas. We moved into this gorgeous duplex at the end of a horseshoe-shaped neighborhood. The house was built in the early 1900s and had an unfinished basement with these pool lights that only light up this small area around you. In the basement, there were also these really small boot prints in the cement that looked as if they belonged to a child. The house had a grand staircase that only went to and from the ground floor to the 2nd floor, and a back staircase which went to all 4 floors, originally intended for servants. The ground floor held main living areas, and my brother and I were on the 2nd. I snagged the master, which had its own doorbell. For a 6-year-old, this was awesome, but probably obnoxious. My parents, they stayed on the top floor, which had an unfinished attic room that held pieces of original furniture. Our babysitter once joked that vampires lived in there. Anyway, about a month after moving in, a woman knocked on the door and introduced herself as part of the Historical Society, and asked for my family's permission for this home to be featured in the annual Halloween ghost tour, informing us that this is a usual stop. She let us know that this home was host to a spirit called the Buckskin Ghost, as he appears as a man in buckskin clothing. We informed her that we were new and hadn't had any paranormal experiences. She asked how long we'd been here for. My dad said about a month, to which she replies, "Oh, usually he shows himself by now." My dad politely declined to be on the tour. I think my parents either didn't believe or were a little bit scared, but we were still unpacking things at this point too, mostly boxes which were in the garage, which was attached to the back stairwell near the basement. Now, Dad noticed the light in the garage was out and went to go and change it. Completely normal thing. As my dad is reaching up to change the light, it comes back on though. He makes sure that it's screwed in all the way, climbs down the ladder and puts it away. When he returns to the garage, the light is out. Confused, my dad fetched the ladder again. He returns. The light's back on though. Frustrated, he moves the ladder out of the way. The light goes off. So he sets up the ladder, climbs up, and as he's reaching up to change the light, it comes back on again. My dad is beyond frustrated now and yells, "Stop messing with me." The light comes back on and doesn't go out the entire time that we live there. This was our introduction to the next 10 months. Other odd things happened in the home, like the radio turning on to a static station extremely loudly, and there were rooms in the basement our dog just would never go in. Anytime anything would happen, we would refer to Bucky acting up. While we lived there, we learned more about the base's haunted history too. We even purchased a book of the ghost stories, which included our home. This book also featured a story of a little girl who befriended a ghost who would play dolls with them. When that family moved out, the girl left her doll at the house for her friend. Now, remember the original furniture that was in the attic? When we first moved in, we looked in all the drawers, and in one of those drawers, there was that doll. One that I didn't learn anything about until months later. I don't know what happened to the doll, but I only ever saw it once. For the most part, nothing too terrifying happened in the house, up until my dad stayed by himself. My dad was a night pilot, meaning that he usually slept during the day. And one day, he was woken up by the sound of heavy footsteps coming up the stairs at the base level. My dad got up and opened the door and asked if anyone was there, and immediately the noise stops. My dad went to check the window overlooking the street to see if a service van was at the house or something. For those who haven't lived on a military base, they occasionally send people to the home to do things like change air filters and all that. My dad didn't see anything though, and so he went back to bed. But he was awoken again to the sound of heavy footsteps on what he perceived as the second floor. My dad shot out of bed, went to the door, and as soon as he opened the door, the noises, they stopped. He yells again, "Is anyone there?" No response. So he goes and he lays back down. My dad then hears items of furniture moving in the room opposite the wall in front of the bed, the one with the original furniture items. He jumps out of bed and leaves the house without a second thought at this point, and it wasn't until he was at work later that he realized that he would be going back to the home alone, and questioned what was in that home with him. I was 6 when all of this went down, and for years we have talked about these experiences and others that have happened to their friends and family. We've continued to check for more stories online about this house. Others have also experienced a friendly but mischievous ghost affectionately called Bucky. I've had other strange experiences throughout my life, and I believe this house is what opened me up to them. I'm now dating a man who is very much a skeptic, and while visiting my home in Florida, my dad told him this story. Weirdly too, the light in the kitchen was flickering throughout this retelling. Jokingly, my boyfriend yells, "Stop messing with me," when it flickers off. The light immediately then turned on and continued to stay on while he visited. You can look up the ghost of 85B Schofield Circle, Fort Riley, Kansas if you would like to. There are plenty of stories from the base that deserve to be heard, including this one, and I encourage those who have made it this far to do some additional research on this haunted military base. And if you live in this house, please let Bucky's story be told on that ghost tour.